Okay, we're up. And welcome to the August meeting of the Journal Square Community Association. My name is Kevin Bing. I'm the president of the Community Association. Thank you for joining us tonight. Normally, we were going to be streaming these meetings through Facebook Live, but tonight is the first time we're streaming through new software. So we should be able to stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter or Periscope. We can solicit your comments, but only through Facebook right now. That's the only way we can get the comments back. But if you have questions for our speakers or anybody else, just leave it in the comments below and we'll try and get to them throughout the meeting. A few members, this is a result of some member feedback. A few members had concerns because you needed to have a Facebook account to watch a Facebook Live video. But as far as I understand, anybody can log onto YouTube and watch this. Same as Twitter. So we're trying to get to a larger audience and hopefully, fingers crossed in the future, possibly Instagram Live. So that'll be fun. With that, I'm going to cut over to Mia, who's going to handle our first bit of business and give us the treasurer's report. Well, let me unmute you, Mia. Hang on a second.
Okay. All right. It hasn't changed much. The total balance is $39,402.87, of which the general portion is $2,181.53. The Bergen Arches is $30,245.03. Bergen Square is $6,976.31, which will be going down since we're issuing refunds as this year's event has been canceled. And that's it. So it's $39,402.87, and we have 111 dues paying members.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mia. I'm going to bring it back. Where are we in the agenda? Okay, I have another bit of business. We had reached out to the members previously. We had a poll that we wanted members' feedback on an important issue facing our community. And it was about the creation of a civilian complaint review board. At our previous meeting, I announced the results of that poll. I want to apologize. When I had sent out that initial email, we had two different member lists, online members and in-person member signups, and we had not reconciled them. So I inadvertently sent the email out to not our entire membership, and I just want to take responsibility for that and apologize. To remedy that, I ran it by the board, explained to them what was going on. So I sent out a second email, which I believe went out in the middle of July, just like a few weeks after our last meeting. And to follow up, same question, same poll, just sent to the people who were not invited to vote previously. We concluded that. We followed the same process. They had a reminder email. We closed it out. We ended up with a lot more responses, but very similar results. And I'm going to try and share that with you now. And so if you look here, I think you can see my screen being shared. The question was, do you support the creation of a civilian complaint review board in Jersey City? We have 49 responses, overwhelmingly 87%, 43 responses said yes, they do. 12%, 6 responses said no. So ultimately, the final results of the question never changed from the results I gave at the July meeting, but now everyone was enfranchised. Everybody had the opportunity to vote. And about 50% of our members ended up voting in the poll. So thank you, everybody, that participated. And that type of feedback really informs the board. It's going to inform our conversation today. Just give us a temperature of where our organization is at and the changes they would like to see in our community. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker this month, Pamela Johnson. She is the president of the Jersey City Anti-Violence Coalition. Is president right? Am I right with that?
Executive director.
Executive. My mistake.
It's okay. It's all
right. So yeah, Pam, I'd love to get in. I have a few questions for you, and then we're going to turn it over to Facebook and bring them in. So what was my first question? Okay, so my first question, pretty simple stuff. Could you introduce yourself and give us your background on what the Anti-Violence Coalition does?
Sure. So my name is Pamela Johnson. I am the executive director of the Jersey City Anti-Violence Coalition Movement. Happy to be a part of your August monthly meeting. Thank you, Kevin, and any member of the board and all involved who wanted to make sure that I was here today. So I'm happy for that. Done a lot of work with Kevin in the past and looking forward to doing a lot of work in the future with the Journal Square Community Association. So thank you guys. So I'm a lifelong resident of Jersey City, born and raised on the South Side. I still live on the South Side. I always want to give a little background of where I'm from. I am the mother of 2 children. I have a 28-year-old daughter and a 22-year-old son, both raised on the South Side. My 28-year-old has a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old daughter, who's my first grandchild, who's also being raised on the South Side. So a lot of the work that we put in Jersey City, I know folks see it on the South Side because that's where the need is right now. But we're definitely here for all of Jersey City. We just know that we need to make sure that we take care of home first, and it starts within our backyard. Jersey City Anti-Violence was formed in 2014 after the unfortunate murder of Detective Melvin Santiago at Walgreens on Communipaw and Kennedy Boulevard. And it was just a time that we needed to make sure that we were not only speaking about issues that plague our community as it pertains to violence, but also doing something about it. One of our community members who's also born and raised in Jersey City, Joe Brown, he put out an all call on Facebook, and 5 residents responded to that. I was one of them. And then we just kind of just hit the trenches and just started, working on the front lines, trying to figure out what we can do in our community. And we first had to understand what the problem was and what the people needed. And then, we had to also sound the alarm with elected officials and community representatives to make sure that we were looking at that need and making sure that we were providing resources and services to that population of people.
Fantastic. I know recently with the Black Lives Matter protests that have been going on in Jersey City, your organization and you specifically have been a leader in the protests. For some of our members who maybe haven't made it out to all of the protests or aren't as familiar with that work, how would you describe the goals for your group and the other groups participating in those protests?
So I think our first Black Lives Matter protest was like in about 2015 or close to 16. And it was just, with national news and national media covering the unarmed killings of Black men and women across the country. And we just felt like we needed to do something. So I didn't necessarily want to kind of take the lead in all of that, but I know when action needs to take place, that you can't be shy about, stepping out and being that voice and encouraging and inspiring others to join you. And so we've been doing that. And I think after the public murder of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, I think we all got a chance to see a grown man who was definitely not posing a threat, calling out for his mother. And when he called for his mother, I heard his call. And my mother heard his call. And I think all mothers around the country should have heard that call. And I hope they did and sprung into action in their own way, right? Because their action is not necessarily my action. But we all should take action and try to figure out how we can make sure that we're preventing things from happening, how we're intervening in things, and how we're holding people accountable for the misconduct and police brutality in America. So I think that's where, even in COVID, so we had in Jersey City, about 7 homicides prior to Mr. Floyd being murdered. And, we felt like we could not really spring into action because we're in quarantine, and we had already been in quarantine for months. So my daughter was really worried about me in quarantine. She expressed the fact that she didn't think that I was going to be good in quarantine because of the work that we do in the community. But I was trying to maintain that sense of, urgency with health and in the pandemic to protect my family and others. But after Mr. Floyd was murdered on camera, we had to spring into action. And so we stepped out of the shadows of being in our house in quarantine and put our own lives on the line and said enough is enough. And we have to make sure that we're doing that. So every Tuesday, we hold a weekly demonstration, is what we call it, against systemic racism in front of City Hall from 4 to sometimes 7 p.m., but it's really held from 4 to 6, but sometimes we go over. And just bringing awareness to not only what happened in Minneapolis, not only what has been happening in New York and in Baltimore and in other areas of the United States, but also bringing information and awareness of what's been happening in our own community. You know, we've had our own situations with police misconduct and police brutality that has gone unchecked and overlooked, and folks have not been held accountable. And in fact, a lot of the officers still have jobs, even though they have numerous IA complaints out on them. They're still allowed to work and collect a fairly good wage. And they have several complaints against them. So just wanted to make sure that we were getting that information out, especially about the CCRB, which I know you want to ask me about later, but we've been fighting for a civilian complaint review board for the last 3 years since Sergeant Ransom ran over a young man in Audubon Park. And he has since lost his job, but he still collects a pension even after that grave misconduct and even after being a disgraced sergeant on the Jersey City Police Force.
Let me ask you about the CCRB, because you
Sure.
talked a lot about accountability.
Yeah.
You know, as I mentioned at the top, our organization is in favor of a civilian complaint review board. I know you were on a previous board that was sort of a precursor to a civilian complaint review board, a less formal oversight board. In terms of the reforms that people are looking for, I know Councilman Solomon is working on this and other people in City Hall. Yep. In terms of the mayor was at our July meeting talking about issues around legality in terms of what state law allows and what the local law allows. Where do you see that reform effort today, and where do you see it going in the future?
I mean, we've been working very closely with Councilman Solomon, Councilman Lavaro, and some community leaders and residents in the community for the CCRB. We've since drafted an ordinance which has been which is going to be recently presented to the ad hoc committee that was formed to look over like policing policies and training and all of that. But we're moving right ahead and partnered with the ACLU and New Jersey Together to talk to the state and you know, make sure that they're understanding what we need and what we want, and that we're not going to waver either, right? So a civilian complaint review board without subpoena power is nothing. And so this is why, so I do sit on the Public Safety Advisory Board, but this is why it has no teeth, because we're not really moving in a way that is going to help, you know, Jersey City folks, you know, understand and make sure we're holding officers accountable. We're not even privy to certain information. I mean, it took us, we stepped out and demanded that we see the body cam from the incident that happened on Boswick Avenue on May 5th in the quarantine. And so we just saw that in July. But we're not even privy to certain information as residents and as citizens of the city who pay taxes, to understand like what exactly is happening with our police department. And also, why are we hiring so many police? I mean, on the South Side, we're over police. And it hasn't stopped homicides or shootings from happening. Which I'm not saying the police are equipped to do either. I'm saying that it's not working, but we continue to hire more police and put those police officers on the corners on the South Side, and it looks like a war zone. I mean, they have their lights on at night. And it's just, we're mostly residential over here. So you have folks who live on MLK, folks who live on Ocean Avenue, and you have the lights on the corner in those hot spots. And that's not necessarily helping things. So we want to see things change. We don't want to keep doing the same thing because we get the same results. I think that, I'm hoping anyway, I know that Assemblywoman Angela McKnight put forth a bill to try to make CCRB statewide. But I also know that she recently got pushback on that in the assembly, right? And so, like,
where do you think the pushback's coming from?
I did some research, and although I consider Governor Murphy and Attorney General Graywall allies, I also understand that the Attorney General has some issues with, giving the CCRB subpoena power, which that's a problem, because if we don't have that, then we have nothing. We have another Jersey City, civilian review board, which doesn't really do anything. I mean, we've had input where the cameras go, where the CCTV cameras go when they started working, and we got that new contract. But that's really all we have. It's just kind of a reporting tool, like to report back on, open homicides or open shootings, to let us know where they are in the process. But it's not making sure that we're actually holding officers accountable for misconduct, or officers who have multiple outstanding internal affairs complaints on them, to be held accountable, or for that procedure to move forward. If you have multiple complaints, internal affairs complaints on you, and it's still 6 months later and nothing has happened, that process is moving too slow. And we need another entity to come in and say, listen, what's making it move so slow, and how can we make sure it moves faster, and make sure that we have the information that we need to say what we think is right and what's not. We have an opinion on things. And we also, I spoke at a rally in the Heights last night, and it was a beautiful showing of Heights residents, but I had to explain to them that they may not necessarily understand what we face on the South Side and how we're over policed. I had a woman tell me how they feel like they can't really call the police because, they're scared to call them. And I'm like, we're not scared to call them, but we just know when they come, 9 times out of 10, we're looked at as the assailant and not the victim at times. So, we want to make sure those things change, and the CCRB is necessary.
Okay. I wanted to lead into a question that's similar to what you're describing. One of the national calls for the protests that have been going on for the last few months nationwide, national calls, is to defund the police, which, the protest in Jersey City isn't necessarily the protest in Seattle or Chicago or Atlanta, right? Every community has their own needs. But as a leader in Jersey City, my question to you is, do you support the calls to defund the police? What do you think is the appropriate role for policing in our community? And do you think the budget should be reformed or reallocated to other services?
So I'm just going to turn on my light because I see you guys can't really see me too much. Just give me 1 second. I hope you can see me.
Everybody has to be a TV star on Zoom.
This is so much better. This is so much better. I was like, I want them to make sure they see my face when I comment on this. So I hear the national calls about defunding the police, right? We don't use the word defund, right? Our words are to redistribute and reallocate funds. I'm not sure who came up with that term, and no malice intended. However, what that term did was create, scare tactics with people. So they're like, defund the police. We were starting to see flyers in Jersey City circulated around saying, who are you going to call when you need the police, because they're talking about defunding the police and police are not going to be there, which is not true, right? So of course we need police, right? We work with police, and we've been working with them for the past 5 years. Here's the issue though. So there are instances where police are not the people to call. Right. So if you have a mentally challenged person, or who's going through some type of trauma, if you have people who are youth who need social workers involved, who are displaced or living in foster care or going through trauma within their own community, if you have domestic violence issues, right? We've been asking also for the past 5 years to have a team of domestic violence people to accompany the police when they respond to domestic violence calls. Because at the same time, I am a domestic violence survivor, right? And I remember when the police used to come to my house after I called them, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like they were questioning me as if I had to somehow prove that I was victimized, right? And so, and that's because that shouldn't be their job, right? We should not ask teachers to be everything, just like we shouldn't ask police to be everything. So we're asking for a reallocation and redistribution of funds to go towards social workers, mental health workers, youth programming, rec services, anti-violence programs, and any other mentors, any other entities that can help with that issue of feeling like you're disenfranchised from your community, feeling like you're continuously going through trauma, as we do every day on the South Side. I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday, And I had to really, because a lot of folks are talking about healing and how do we heal, and what is, and especially with Black women, like how do Black women heal, and are you guys seeking therapy? And I had to come to the understanding that at 46 years old, I will never heal from the trauma that I've experienced in my life. The things that, whether it happened to me directly or happened around me to my sisters and brothers, and I've witnessed it, or even knowing the history of slavery and seeing the countless movies about slavery, I'll never heal from all that. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that, as long as my healing doesn't put me in a place of despair. So as long as my healing puts me in a place where I continue to stand up and fight for others, I'm good with that. And the healing takes place when I'm no longer here, right? I can understand that, and I can be honest about that. But I definitely believe in reallocating funds from the police budget. Public safety budget is the top heavy budget line item in our budget. Right. A lot of that is salaries. A lot of that is overtime. And they blame the overtime on the South Side for those standing posts that I just told you we don't want. We don't want those standing posts because they don't work. You know, we've had people killed on the corner where the police were set up, and I'm not blaming them. I'm saying, in the words of Reverend Perry, call another play, because this play isn't working. It's like football. You got to change it up. When it's not working, you do something different. You don't continue to do the same thing over and over again because you get the same results. And if folks are for that, doing the same thing over and over again, it really just tells me who you are as a person. It kind of tells me you don't want different results. So where we're done with pleading with elected officials, it's a time to stand up and say, this is what we want. This is what we demand, and the people are behind us. And if you're not behind us, then maybe we should need to elect somebody else.
Thank you for that. That's very insightful. I just want to ask, if you guys are watching on Facebook, please leave a comment below. We can see them starting to come in. And in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Anu, who's going to start asking your questions for Pam. So if you have any questions for Pam about the work that the Anti-Violence Coalition does, about the recent protests, policing, please put it there below. I do want to ask, though, if we have a member watching this, they like what you're saying, they want to get more involved, they want to start participating, what do you think is the best way for them to get involved with the Anti-Violence Coalition? You're muted.
Sorry about that. So if you go to our website, www.jcacm.org, there is a contact link for you to make sure that you're trying to figure out like how you can help in any type of way, or just know what else, just know more about us. You can do it that way, or you can contact our vice president of our board, which is Lilia Diaz at lilia.rdiaz@gmail.com. You can always email me at PamelaJohnson388@gmail.com. And you can always call me. My number is public on my Facebook page for everybody. And I get a lot of calls every day, 201-589-8322. I make myself very accessible to the public.
I was going to say, that's very direct. That's a straight line right to you. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
With that, Anu, I want to turn it over to you. Do you have any other comments from Facebook, questions from the members? Anu, you're muted as well.
Oh.
Do that all the time. Thanks. Thanks, Pam, for being here. Yeah, we have some questions. Hold on, I just lost the page, of course. 1 second. Well, it was around patrolling, police patrolling the area. What are your thoughts about that? Are police patrolling the area? And there was also a question about if it actually works to decrease crime, because there's studies to show that more police decreases crime, but is that really true?
Right. So definitely more police does not decrease crime. I do believe in community policing. I grew up with community policing. When I was younger, and it didn't matter if it was a white cop or a black cop or any other color. I grew up on Wade Street, and Officer Schaefer, like, I always speak very highly of him, and he was a white man, but he made sure that was his detail, and he policed that community like he would want somebody to police his community. You know, he talked to residents. He knew who were the kids who were a little bit, you know, unruly, so to speak, or may get into some trouble, or just kids who were just energetic and just, you know, needed that extra whatever. And he made sure that he communicated with their parents or grandparents or the neighbors to understand that we are here to help. We are not here to enforce the law, although that is a part of their job. But when we're patrolling through your community, we're here to figure out, like, you know, what's going on with you. Like, how's your backyard coming? How's your front yard coming? How are the kids? What's going on? And that's how they spoke to us and talked to us with respect. And I remember that as a child. So I'm 46 years old today. And I was happy when Chief Kelly took over, because he instituted a community policing program. He got the input from community leaders and organizations. We were one of them. And it was just, it started to change. But see, what happens is if there's no oversight, it goes back to what it used to be. And so I think that it started to change, and we were excited about that last year. But then what we saw months later was police sitting in their vehicles, not getting out, not walking around in their vehicles, on their phones, or talking to one another. And that wasn't necessarily engaging the community. And so I would periodically ride up and down MLK or Ocean Avenue, and where I would see police, I would get out and talk to them and let them know what we expected of them in a very neighboring way. Because at the end of the day, we want that connection with law enforcement. We don't want to be enemies. We want to be allies to each other. So community policing is great. Walking details are great. They do not decrease crime, though. But what they do is promote a community engagement that will, you know how they say, like, you know, when something happens, folks don't want to tell the police. But if we were more engaging, they would tell. They would have something to say. They would have an input of where you can get information from. But if they're scared of you, or if they feel no connection to you, it doesn't work.
I had I actually have a question about the budget. I think the city, Jersey City, issued the budget today. I didn't get a chance to look at it in depth, but so I don't know if there was any kind of reallocation of budget for the police, but do you have any thoughts around that? And are you working? I think you said you were working with Solomon and others about the budget. Right.
So I did see. So we are working with, like I said, Councilman at Large Rolando Lavaro, and Councilman James Solomon of Ward E. Ironically, like, Ward E doesn't have anything to do with the South Side, but he is definitely always on the side of right when it comes to doing what's right for the South Side, and I appreciate that. Yeah, so we've been talking about the budget and talking about where to extract money from, and it really has to come from public safety. When you talk about, like, so when we're talking about mental health and we're talking about trauma, that should be dealt with from Health and Human Services, whose budget is not. They need more money in their budget. You know, the recreation budget was cut last year, if I'm not mistaken, by hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? That money needs to be put back into that budget. It can come from nowhere but public safety, in my opinion. And I believe that instead of growing the police force, so here's the thing. I think since 2013, there have been 600 and plus police officers hired on a JCPD, right? So, and that's because some folks are retiring, and we understand that, but we don't always have to replace people. We can make sure that we're putting those monies into something else that may work for the betterment of the community. I know Mayor Fulop, he put out, I think I saw a tweet or something about he's not raising property taxes, and he is going into the budget to reallocate funds from, and public safety was one of them. And I was excited about that until I learned that on the agenda, that's going to be coming up on the August 12th meeting, which is Wednesday, that he also wants to put, I think, 23 new officers in the academy. So the money that was taken from the budget was not necessarily money extracted to be put in other realms, but it was, you know, folks giving buyouts and being allowed to retire, right? And so that's great, because I do believe that in order to clean up a culture in a police department or any other, you know, culture that's not be fitting of the community, you need to have buyouts. You need to do that, but not necessarily replace them with new recruits, but put that money into those aspects that we're talking about: social workers, mental health workers, mentors, trauma navigators, and things like that. So, I mean, it's like we're working though, and we're not anti Mayor Fulop either. You know, we've been working with Mayor Fulop for a long time. So, you know, we just want to make sure that we're at a place where we can all make sure that we're doing things for the betterment of the people who elected these officials and not for anyone else or anything else.
I don't have any other questions, but thank you.
Okay. Mia, do you want to ask a
No,
question?
I have a question because Mayor Fulop was on last time and he quoted Newark and the number of police officers. I don't remember the numbers. I think they were around 1,100 and change, maybe 1,200. And we have 950. And he felt that we need to continue to grow the police department, which is really the opposite of what you're suggesting.
Absolutely. And we work a lot with Newark. Newark has a anti-violence association led by Keisha Leora, and I work very closely with her. The difference between Newark though, and I mean, they do have a large police force, but the difference between them is that between us and Newark is that they actually provide resources and services for nonprofit organizations who work in violence prevention and violence interruption to do their job and have the money behind them to do so. It's a line item in the budget. Mayor Ras Baraka just created a violence prevention department, which the young lady Keisha, who works on the ground on the front lines, is in charge of that, because guess what? She knows the streets, right? And she's not a police officer, and she can actually get more information out of residents other than the police, right? So they're not, I feel like in Jersey City, we're not empowering organizations to lead in this, right? But these are the same organizations who are on the ground getting the work done. You know, so when there's a shooting on the South Side or actually anywhere, Chief Kelly will call myself and he will call Frank Gilmore, and he'll say, you know, we just had this shooting. We know you know who the next victim is going to be. You know, Chief Kelly, we had after December 10th, we had a round table with the Attorney General and Governor Murphy and some state officials. And he said publicly, Pam knows who the next victim is going to be. Pam knows who the shooter is. And so does Frank. But guess what? They have no money. And our job is in locking people up and not in what they do. So what I'm saying is if you really want to, you know, make a big impact in the community, then you empower those organizations on the ground and you provide resources to them so they can do their job effectively and not be scrambling around with a zero budget.
So have you brought that up with Mayor Fulop?
Oh, absolutely.
And what's his response?
I mean, Mayor Fulop and we've been talking for years now. I think, and even, you know, folks in the health department, you know, and just folks in the city in general. And so I think the thing is that they're not ready to put a line item in the budget for it. We're chasing grants and we're chasing CDBG funds and we're chasing foundation money. And when that runs out, then we'll chase another grant and we'll chase some more CDBG funds. But a line item in the budget is what we need to really make a big impact. And I don't know if they're ready for that. I mean, because you know what? Everybody's not ready for that. So some folks who elected them are not ready for that. So to actually be behind that, you have to really stand out and be brave and courageous and say, listen, I'm looking at the south side of my city. It looks totally different from this side of the city. And this is what we need to do to support them. And that takes courage.
I think we have a few more questions from Facebook and another member from the group. I'm going to try and limit it to 3 more questions. So Anu, I want to go to you first because I know there's a Facebook question.
So there's another question about the pandemic, and are you concerned with the current pandemics possibly causing an increase in crime, and how could that impact redistributing police funds at this time?
So definitely, I know that the pandemic has, domestic violence has increased tremendously in the pandemic, right? Because usually you're not home with your abuser all day. So that has definitely increased a lot of crime. I think the gun violence in Jersey City and on the South Side where it's centralized, it's the same as usual. it's not any different, except that folks are home and they're noticing that we had from March 31st to April 6th, 6 homicides, right? And so that's because they're home. If they weren't home, they really wouldn't have noticed that, because if it's not happening in your part of town, you know, you're not really paying attention too much. You hear about it and you're like, oh, okay, that's really sad, but you know, business as usual. But I think folks are home and they're paying more attention. And so they're like, oh, really, what's going on? But it's not the pandemic that's causing the influx in gun violence. It is the state of the South Side in Jersey City and the lack of resources and the lack of attention that we have in our community that's causing the influx in gun violence and the continuation in gun violence. It is the high unemployment rate with Black people on the South Side, specifically Black men. It is the low performing schools on the South Side that have low graduation rates that have been consistent for years on the South Side. You know, it is the deplorable conditions that folks live in on the South Side. It is the broken windows effect that we see on the South Side that has been continuous. It is the lack of attention and the lack of immediacy or urgency to do something about the situation on the South Side. That's what I see on the South Side as being a resident all my life. We can continue to pull ourselves up out of bootstraps, but that hasn't really gotten us too much or too far on the South Side. We've seen MLK go from a thriving African-American business district to African Americans not even being able to rent a storefront on the worst corner because they can't afford it. Just the economics on the South Side. You know, there is a disparity that needs to be addressed, and we can't continue to have studies to put those numbers in front of us and nobody's looking at it. And so that's another study we pay for, but we're not doing anything about it. So it's just like, so what do you really want to do? You really want to change things, or you really just want to make us think you're ready to change things? Because we don't believe it.
Okay. I'm going to take, I know Bill has a question, and then I'll give the last one to Renee.
Yes. My question is this, Pam. What about the 2 council members from the South Side, Jermaine Robinson and Denise Ridley? Are they in support of your initiatives?
They have not been in support of the CCRB publicly or to myself. And I know the Bostwick Avenue incident, they did review the tapes with community leaders. And if I'm not mistaken, they were waiting for the investigation to be finalized before they actually put out a public opinion. But as far as my understanding, they have not said anything public. You know what? Let me correct myself. Denise Ridley recently, I think was the last council meeting, put out a resolution to support the efforts of the state to Angela McKnight to support that effort to make sure that CCRBs become in every state. So I take that back. My apologies. Yes, she did. Last council meeting.
What about Council President Waterman? What about her?
She did create the ad hoc committee, which is to review police training. And I know that she did ask us for the CCRB information, which was sent over to, I think, the board of the ad hoc committee. But to date, like, there's been no public statement besides the resolution from Denise Ridley to support the CCRB.
Renee, you had a question? Renee, are you?
She's muted. She's
I
checking.
am. Hi, Pamela.
Hi, Renee.
I'm an Aries too, so April 12th.
Oh, okay. Happy belated birthday.
Same to you. So you see the social workers being rolled into some of the staffing for the police department, and they would need to be, obviously, I'm not sure if the police have 3 shifts. They would be on staff for all 3 shifts, and based on the nature of the call, they would be asked to accompany the police on particular calls. Is that how you envision one of the changes?
Yes. Especially if that call comes in as a, so for instance, I had a young lady in the Heights call me a couple of weeks ago who, and I didn't know her like when she called me, but when she described who she was and she comes to our protest on Tuesdays, I remember seeing her. And she called because there was a mentally, how she classified him, a mentally disturbed man in her community, which with the area was predominantly white, and he was Black. And her neighbors all came outside, and some of them were saying, we're going to call the police on him. But she clearly saw that something else was wrong. And so she called me and said, you know, I don't want to call the police, and I don't want the police to come and then it turns into something else, because he has other issues that they're not capable of handling. And that's okay to say, like, I'm not capable of handling every situation, right? None of us are. So that's okay to say. It's not demeaning the police or anything. It's just saying that you need help, just like we all need help in our jobs, right? Especially when they get out of our job, you know, what we do. In the line of what we do. And so I called Deputy Chief Flora and let him know, and she gave me the address, and I gave him the address, and then he sent a unit out there to deal with that man who was not taken to jail, but instead taken to the hospital, right? Because when you're taken to jail, and then you know, you're dealing with a system that is not addressing mental health, and you're dealing with a system that will send you home the same way you walked in there. And so it sends you back in your community to the cycle continues. So yeah, so I see it happening when those calls come in, and the behavior is, you know, just something that they think is sporadic, or maybe something, a substance abuse issue or a mental illness issue. There should be mental health workers or social workers accompanying the police, whether they meet them there or not. They should be on the scene as well, right, to diffuse anything. You know, when we're talking about training police officers in de-escalation is not just a hostage situation. It's not just a mass shooting, right? De-escalation could be a man or a woman who's suffering from mental illness, right, who has a knife in the kitchen and holding folks hostage, but they don't need a hostage negotiator. They need something else. So that's what we're saying. We want to make sure that we're getting people that something else, to make sure that they're getting the help they need to better their lives.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of that. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. This was fantastic.
All right. Thank you for having me. I just want to say that. Thank you for having me. I appreciate all of you. I'm looking at all you faces except Tom right now, but he did open his camera a couple of times. So, hey, Tom. So, yeah, no, thank you so much. And thank you for being attentive. Thank you for doing the survey. And thank you for being an ally. We definitely appreciate you. And this is not, I just want to say again, this is not a us against them. This is a why can't we all unite and make sure that we're addressing the issues citywide. So that's all we're saying.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much for coming out and spending the time with us. I think it was really valuable for our members. So
thank you so much. Appreciate you. Hey, Steven.
He's up next. Don't spoil anything.
Okay, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere.
You can hang on. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right. With that, I do want to introduce Steve Lipsky. So technically, we're beginning our committee reports now. This is normally the committee report time of the meeting. But Steve is actually, he's taken hold. He's an activist in the community. He's a former council person, very involved locally. In fact, I was just helping him clean up Sergeant Anthony's Park about a week or two ago.
I'll be there tomorrow.
He's very busy, but he's actually spearheading a new committee. He came and talked to the board at our last board meeting. We're all behind it. We think this is a good project, but it's specifically to address the homelessness issue, which is, I know, something we've talked about at perhaps our first meeting all those years ago, and at meetings ever since. We had the recent meeting, I believe, in April with Emmy Titterington and Katie Brennan, where this was our topic of discussion. And so Steve wants to bring an ongoing conversation to the table, and is looking for new members. They're going to try and form a mission statement, things like that. I'm going to let Steve introduce himself, introduce the topic. So, Steve.
Thanks, Kev. And it's great to be on this side of the camera and not just on the Facebook side. And I also want to commend Pamela for all of her work. It's crucial. I'll just give, as a way of introduction to the homeless issue, an experience I had about 4 months ago here at the St. John's Apartments. There was a wood makeshift cabana made on Bevan and St. Paul that could house upward of 4 or 5 people. Now, calls were put into the North District Police to remove it. So I called over to Dave Calton, the community relations officer, and we had a long conversation. He said, Steve, look, what we want to do, certainly we don't want to promote people just, plopping a structure wherever they want to live in. But at the same time, we want to address the needs of these people. So Dave got a cadre of social workers, came over about a day or two later, went over there, introduced themselves, extended a helping hand, which they did, and then after which they dismantled the structure. So certainly just sending cops over wielding batons or taking out guns is not the solution. I mean, we've got people in our society who genuinely and authentically need help. So that being said, thanks for that introduction, Kev. So I won't, most of you, everyone, I think, except for Anu, I know I've had experiences with across the way, but Anu, I look forward to working with you, and when the time permits, getting to meet you in person. Let me start out by saying a homeless man saved my life. So Kevin, I shared the story. I'll give you the Spark Notes version of it. Is that when I went out to Washington State last year, exactly a year from this time, I was involved in a car crash. I lost control of a car avoiding a gang of elk. And in the accident, I hit on the passenger side and it destroyed that side of the car. Then I brushed up against trees. This was just outside Mount Rainier Federal National Park, wrecked out the driver's side, and I went head on with a tree that was dead, but I cracked the base and it fell over and crushed the roof. But I got pinned in the car and my cell phone wouldn't work. There was no service. A gentleman who grew up in the area and knew the area saw that there was something anomalous, came over and to help me out of the car, took me to a gas station 4 miles away where there was a hot spot, and I was able to get the Washington State Troopers. But in the interim, I got to know this guy. His name was Keith, and he explained to me that he had lost his business and couldn't afford the property that he was living on that was adjacent to the national park where he had a wood carving business. And just about a year earlier, had lost his home and he'd been living in his pickup truck. So I contribute my being here today in large part to Keith, and I want to honor his memory because he's special to me. So that being said, let me get into the nuts and bolts of it. Well, just before I get into the nuts and bolts of it, some of you know that in my faith tradition, I'm a deacon. And in my faith tradition, there are at least two, well, there's certainly in the what's called the New Testament, it's the newer version of the what's known as the Bible. There are two books. One is the book of Mark, chapter 14, and the book of Matthew, chapter 26, where it is said that Jesus had said, "The poor shall always be with you. You can tend to them anytime. I shall not be always with you. Spend time with me." Well, I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. And I think that certainly, the poor were around 2,000 years ago and they're poor today. And I think that anyone who has fell on any misfortune can certainly empathize in some capacity with the poor. Now, so I use that in part as a backdrop, but there's a lot more which I won't go into. But I'll say this is that since we have announced this initiative, I've already received about six inquiries or people stating they want to take part in this committee. Renee being one of them, Tom Zuper being another. Bill Armbuster introduced me to a man named Bruce. Dario has volunteered, and there are others. I'm amassing their emails. I'm going to create a group, that I can send out emails to, and as Anu sent me an email earlier, to form a mission statement. To me, one of the key aspects is generating capital. Without capital, we heard that, for example, reaching out, as Pam had mentioned, having nonprofit partnerships are essential. What I commend Mayor Fulop on is through his Healthier JC initiative, there are about 40 nonprofits that get grants, upward of about 2,500. I know because a group I belong to, JC Runners, received a $2,500 grant to help in the community. It's not a lot of money, but it's at least an initiative to help and show that there is some partnership, and it's a way of staying connected to the city. So we need capital. That's one thing. And there are two aspects that I'd like to see if we were able to generate capital to put it to use and see what the committee thinks. One, and I mentioned this to the mayor when I saw him on Central Avenue this past week, is to come up with an actionable flow chart. So for example, if Pam gets that call from a white woman up in the Heights saying, oh, we got this black man and what are we gonna do? Well, when we go there, most people are at a loss in terms of identifying symptoms or need. If we can come up with a flow chart to put people on at least some schematic of a spectrum as to how to engage a person, I think it could help inform our decision-making processes. And then rather than jump to conclusions about people, we can, step-by-step look at what interventions societally might be available to help these people. Secondly, I've done a lot of work with Garden State Episcopal. I've done some work with New Community Corporation, Monsignor Linda's project out in Newark. Renee's put me on to a group called the Jericho Promise, I think, or Jericho Project. And these are nonprofit groups that partner with cities and get funding to assist those who are less fortunate. I've also been in touch with New Jersey Community Capital, who are willing to get involved. So let me wrap up by saying this, I've done some research, and there are about a half dozen cities in the United States of America: Montgomery, Alabama, Sacramento, Denver, and there's one in Alaska. There are a few, there are about 6, who put out parking meter looking like devices, and they use the money that are collected in those parking meters to go exclusively to help the homeless. Some have called it Change for Change. And they, minimally I've seen, raised in one town, I think it was in Denver. No, it wasn't Denver, it was Montgomery. In its first year, they raised $68,000. And now they're upward of collecting about $400,000 a year. Denver, I think, gets a lot. They're over $1 million what they get in their Change for Change project. So I've mentioned this to Stacey Flanagan, I mentioned it to the mayor, I mentioned it to Councilman Bogiano. They're all in favor of it. So once I get after tonight, anyone who's interested in being part of this committee, please reach out. I think we're doing it through the association. Reach out to the association's email, let them know, and then we can look to see if these parking meters can get into place. I think they will, based on my conversations with our councilman and the mayor and Stacey Flanagan. And we can use that as seed money. But let me say this, I'm a marathoner. I've run 7 marathons. I was supposed to run my 8th this year, but due to Corona, three of which I was listed, including New York City, were canceled. I'm in this for the long run. I was born and raised in Jersey City. I love this town. I love all its people, Black Lives Matter, homeless lives matter. I love all people. I want to try my best to leave this community a little bit better and to reach out with whatever energies I have at this stage of the game to see if we can create something that will take root and can be sustained. Just like if you're interested in seeing a project that is sustainable, look at NCC, New Community Corporation in Newark. It has over a third of a $336 million in assets. They employ over 500 people. They reach out to 3,500 people in the community, from housing to instruction to meals. There's a whole host of social services that they do. but it took them 50 years to get to. I won't likely, unless there's a miracle, be here in 50 years. But if we plant seeds and we get the buy-in, then this will be a great marathon and not a sprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's fantastic. That's a lot of good information. I think it's a good start for a new committee. If you want to get involved with this, please send an email to the new JSQCA@gmail.com. We can leave the email address in the link below. And we'll get your email, mention the title Homelessness Committee. We'll get your email over to Steve so you can be on the list. And if you're not a member, you can go to JSQCA.com, become a member, and check the box for the committees that you're interested in. And we'll get you on there. I can see Anu just posted it in the Facebook comments below, the email address. Thank you, Steve. Do we have a date for the first meeting, or are we going to wait until see how many people are interested?
To me, I've not, but I'd like to meet before August 19th because I'm supposed to be in a video conference with the mayor, Carmen Gandula, and Stacy Flanagan to discuss the parking meters formally and get that up and going, and then B, about a city action plan, and then C, about starting to scope out sites in Jersey City that we could use and purchase and get going to get people housing.
Bill has a question. Have you spoken with Chris Bernardo and the CID about this?
Not about this initiative, but Chris and I go way back.
Sure.
The huge supporter, huge. When I say huge, I mean huge. Love him. His wife, I mean, he'll be on this like a fly on something on the street that dogs leave.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right, then I'm going to move along to the other committee reports. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. And I think this is going to be a good project going forward. But we, like everything else, we need your involvement. So if you're a member out there, if this is something that's interesting to you, send us an email. We'll get you over. We'll connect you with Steve. Great. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Renee with the Clean Committee. I know you've got some developments.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Not too much going on. It's been a pretty hot summer, hard to schedule, things where people are out and about. But I did want to say for anybody who had requested additional trash cans, we have been in touch with the Department of Public Works. They didn't forget about us. They are delayed. They had some staffing issues. I believe they had a few people out ill, and the people that were left, shorthanded are addressing the multitude of complaints that we see on SeeClickFix every day, especially this summer with weeds and trash not being picked up. I understand that the sanitation company may be going out to bid. I don't think that the city is satisfied with the recycling company. So the trash cans are coming. Nobody has been forgotten. And I'll get notification probably from John Lynch soon, and I'll follow up with him if I don't hear from him. So that's the one thing. And also we have started our walking tours of our boundaries. And these walking tours are designed in mind to help identify problem properties and try to address them by either going through SeeClickFix, talking to the property owner, and seeing if they will comply with the city's ordinances. We want to start by reaching out with a letter of introduction from the association and just highlighting some of the responsibilities that as property owners they are required to do, and hopefully maybe gain some members, maybe gain some friends, and help to try to clean up the area that way. Last Friday we had our first walking tour. There's about 7 scheduled, or 7 on the map, I should say, and I haven't scheduled them. I'm trying to do them a little bit closer to the day because of weather and storms. So I should be scheduling the next one probably within a week or so. I'm going to try to schedule them during the day for people who are home, a couple in the evening, and I'll try to do some on Saturday as well. And I'd like to try to get them finished for the entire perimeter of the boundaries by early September. And then we'll give you a report on on what we found out. I can tell you that based on Friday's problem properties, a number of the properties are owned by people who do not live here. So that's a big issue, and we'd like to work on those problem properties first and try to get those people on board. And that's it. That's all I have for today.
Thank you. Bill, do you want to go with the Green Committee?
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, the Green Committee will have a meeting next Tuesday. I sent out a reminder, and I'll post it on our Facebook page also in the next day or two with the link for it. We haven't heard anything back from the New Bike and Walk Coalition of New Jersey. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, if that's the correct name, regarding their discussions with the Open Space Institute and about the Open Space Institute possibly trying to acquire the Bergen Arches from New Jersey Transit, which would be wonderful. The Open Space Institute has an agreement in principle, at least, to acquire an 8.6 mile stretch of railroad track from Montclair to Jersey City, ending very close to the Bergen Arches, but hopefully we'll have some news about that next Tuesday. Also, today I saw an article on Hudson County View about a possible delay in the start of construction on the new county courthouse because the 3 bids all came in very high, and so the freeholders are trying to get this get the bidders to submit new bids that would be less. And the reason why this is important is that once the new courthouse is constructed, then the county will tear down, or I guess the city will actually pay for it, the county administration building at 595 Newark Avenue, which is slated to become a park. So hopefully the county will be able to get lower bids and construction can proceed, and we can move ahead on that. The Green Committee has a dual mandate, parks and environmental sustainability. On the sustainability side, Sustainable JC is having a final training session tomorrow for its tree mapping census. I know that Chris Lamb, one of our board members, has been very active in that up in the Hilltop area in particular. Also, the city's Office of Sustainability has resumed work on the Climate Action Plan, and there's a meeting for the working groups tomorrow, I believe, where people are supposed to submit their comments on the suggested action plans. So that's what I have for now, but hopefully people can, who are interested in parks and sustainability, can join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. That's August 18th. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, you want to do the SAFE Committee?
Yeah, everyone. Hi, good evening. Happy to be here with you. Tom Zupa, Chair of the SAFE Committee. We had terrific feedback from our June virtual town hall meeting that was co-hosted with myself and Adam Cohen. Adam and I are working on some projects trying to include the Slow Streets initiative into more of Journal Square. I'm happy to help out with Steve Lipsky, and so great. It's so great that he's joining us to tackle the homeless issue in Journal Square, and I look forward to working with him and others. As always, feel free to contact me by email. It's Thomas, THOMAS, Zupa, ZUPPA, @gmail.com. We're going to have another virtual town hall meeting probably towards either the end of this month or early September. So stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your week.
Great. I am actually going to be giving you the update on the traffic committee because Adam Cohen wasn't able to make it today. Let me see his report. Not much of an update. He's going to be sending out an email to members of the committee to remind them to provide comments for the John F. Kennedy Boulevard LCD study, which I believe stands for long-term concept development. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but they want to do safety improvements on Kennedy Boulevard, and they're looking for feedback from community members. So Adam will be sending out a email about that. Other than that, he's working with Renee on the walking tours, and he's trying to get in touch with Barka Patel, the senior transportation planner for Jersey City. He wants to go on a walking tour of the neighborhood, do like a informal, I guess, safety audit walking tour, which I've done in the past. It's really valuable to let people actually see the streets that you live on and the problems that you're seeing every day. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris Lamb, who signed on for the construction.
All right, hello. So the Construction and Planning Committee had our August meeting last week. We had 3 items on the agenda for that meeting. We had representatives from White Castle on Kennedy Boulevard come talk to us about an administrative amendment that they're seeking that would allow them to open the inside of the restaurant for dine-in and takeout 24 hours a day. Currently, the drive-through is open 24 hours, and that's been the case for years. They'd like to be able to open the restaurant for people who would walk up, walk in, and want to get takeout, things like that. Certainly, there would be no dine-in during COVID, but afterward, they'd like to be able to have that option to open up. The committee didn't seem too concerned about that, although they did raise some kind of ongoing issues about cleanliness and safety on the site that we'd like to keep talking to White Castle about and hopefully have them address. We also discussed the city council is considering an inclusionary zoning ordinance that would compel developers to include a certain percent of affordable units in developments that meet certain criteria. There's 2 versions, kind of one that the mayor and the administration have come up with, another that the council president has come up with. And I think the council is comparing those 2 versions and trying to reconcile them and get to something that would be passed. So we discussed kind of different features of that ordinance and what our members would like to see in it, and certainly making sure that the ordinance would effectively yield a significant number of affordable units in Journal Square, and that there wouldn't be easy loopholes. So that's one of the big concerns. And then we also had Russell Dover, who's one of our members, give a little bit of a follow-up conversation on the Homestead Place extension, which is a proposed pedestrian street that would run between Newark Avenue and Pavonia Avenue, right by the transportation center. And it would be a street for pedestrians only. There would be no vehicular traffic on it. So we had a design charrette a few months ago where we looked at different design features, different examples of similar types of streets around the world, and talked about what our members would like to see incorporated into the design of that, so that we can give that feedback to city planning and to the private developer who's actually responsible for building the pedestrian street. So that's an ongoing process, and Russell's still compiling some information on that. And we hope to give some feedback to the developer in city planning in the months to come. Otherwise, our meetings are once a month. As I mentioned, our next one, therefore, would be on Wednesday, September 2nd. Don't yet have an agenda for it. That usually comes into place a couple of weeks before the meeting. But if you sign up for Construction and Planning Committee, either on your JSQCA membership form or by emailing newjsqcap@gmail.com, you'll get the updates, the agendas, and meeting notes. Thank you very much.
Very cool. Thank you, Chris. Yep. Okay. I will also be delivering the history committee report since James had to get off the call early. Bergen Square Day 2020 has been canceled. James sent out an email earlier about that. Just given the restrictions around COVID, the governor's executive order, and a variety of other reasons related to COVID, the decision was made to cancel Bergen Square Day 2020. It's hard to have a large outdoor event. We had already postponed it from, I believe, May it was supposed to be. And so, in addition, Bergen Apple Fest, which was usually held at the Apple Tree House, is also canceled for 2020. We are still planning on hosting a virtual forum entitled "Should the Columbus Statue Be Removed from Journal Square?" The date is still TBA. We have to get speakers signed up for that from pro and con and different sides of this issue. So stay tuned for that. Once we have the speakers announced, we'll make up a flyer or graphic, share it on social media, email announcement. Please join us and invite your friends and neighbors. But stay tuned for more information on that. History, communication. Anu or Kezia, do you have anything for communications or outreach?
Hi, yeah, I could quickly give an update. So I mentioned last time that we've combined the communications and outreach committees because there's a lot of overlap. And I think we could do more with these committees if they're joined. We have a lot of ideas in the works. We want to really do a lot more around social media and things like that to really get our message and for outreach and about getting more people in and communications about what we're doing and things like that. We also are experimenting with live streaming to multiple platforms. And so as Kevin mentioned earlier in the meeting, right now we are actually streaming to Facebook as usual, but also Twitter and YouTube. And we hope to add Instagram in the future. So this is sort of, we're still testing it out and seeing how it will work, but we're hoping to do this more often so that people could watch from multiple platforms and not just Facebook, as Kevin mentioned. And then our next meeting is going to be actually, because of the summer months, it's a little hard to get together. So we're going to just do it in September. So our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, September 15th. And I'll send out an email to people who have signed up for both communications and outreach committees and with more information about that. But if you're interested in getting involved, please email our email address or if you're not a member, sign up and click off the communications and outreach committees and the form. And we'd love to have more people involved who are interested in really, anything around outreach and communications.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anu. So yeah, I hope the live stream has been working for you wherever you're watching this. I'm looking at statistics. Most of you are watching on Facebook. But next time you have the choice to use either Periscope on Twitter or YouTube. Again, when you're inviting people, you can share those links as well. We now have a YouTube page. This video will live up there. Again, I want to make another pitch for membership. If you guys are interested, if you like what you've seen today, if you want to get involved with the committees we discussed, JSQCA.com, you can become a member. The dues are $25. I'm looking at Bill because he'll correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, please sign up, get involved. We'd be happy to have you. We're still very active. We have committee meetings going on. We still have important issues that we need to address. So your participation is vital. Okay, so just upcoming events. Jersey City Together is having an action on August 31st from 7:30 p.m. until 9 p.m. This is something they've been preparing for a while. If you want to learn more about it, the URL is njtogether.org/action2020. In addition, I want to let you know about our next meeting. Is going to be Saturday, September 12th at 10 a.m. So we're on our summer schedule where we're doing weeknight meetings. In September, for the rest of the year, we're going to go back to our regular schedule, which is the second Saturday of the month. So the next meeting is going to be Saturday, September 12th at 10 a.m. Our guest speaker will be Dr. Franklin Walker, who's the superintendent of Jersey City Public Schools. With schools reopening or not reopening or distance learning, we know that there's a lot of parents in our community and just a lot of people who have questions, who want to know, what the plans are for the school in the fall. So we really appreciate him being generous and taking the time to meet with us on Saturday morning. So please join us again for that meeting. With that, I believe we're done for the evening. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you to all the committee chairs. Thank you to our speakers, Pam and Steve Lipsky, who's now also a committee chair. I hope you all have a very good night. Any questions, concerns, again, the new JSQCA at gmail.com. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Pam.